Right. It's not supposed to be on week one. Sorry about that. Thought I had it in the right place. So in the meantime, while I'm trying to get it in the right place, what minivan moments have we had lately?
I guess when we look at being in the box versus out of the box, we can definitely say that it applies to courtesy of other drivers, road rage and all that.
Yeah. You think?
You have firsthand today, probably.
Yeah, you
a bunch
probably
of
got pictures.
experiences,
My last one was somebody that was probably going between 90 and 95 miles an hour, cutting people off and everything else, and before I know it, I see a cop pulling him over, and he gets out, and I saw that the cop didn't look very happy walking up to that car.
Now, were you gleeful about that in that moment?
Was I what?
Gleeful?
Gleeful.
I might have, when I was younger.
I'm just curious
when
how
I
in
was
the box
more
you were
mature,
toward
I
that
might have
part.
laughed about it, but at the same time, I'm thinking this is sad.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Because
serious, that's dangerous.
they're letting all these emotions drive their behaviors and put other people in danger,
Yes.
and they're in trouble now.
That's not the smartest thing to do.
But it just definitely applies to being in the box versus
Sure.
out of the box.
Anybody else? Did you now see in the box behavior now that we talked about it? It's amazing how once you talk about something, it's right there and you're starting to see it everywhere. What do you see in the box behavior? Were you in the box? You can admit it.
No, I never.
I think I did a good job of not going into a box through
Okay.
all the stuff that I dealt with.
Okay.
Yeah, there's been a couple times over the past week, just the past week, where either a student or a coworker an action that they do seems insensitive or not really thinking of me, but then I go back, I like to think about the box,
Mm-hmm.
and mostly I think about how hard it is to stay out of the box.
Mm-hmm. That's
It's
very
very
true.
easy to just
Tough
get in.
one.
And then I kind of just let it slide or a bit. Like I try not to dwell on what just happened, but I think in the long term it needs to become more of a thought process rather than just
you letting it go.
Yeah.
Right, because they're
So I think-
spreading that havoc wherever they're going.
He says like tolerating it isn't a solution.
No, that's correct. It's very good. Just bearing with it or putting up with it, that's not the solution. That's just, right? Okay, good. Anybody else?
I've noticed that
I had a outpatient, well, I have a preconceived opinion about Trident and their medical system. It's not on the favorable side.
Okay.
But this past Thursday, I had an outpatient surgery over at the surgery center, so I spent from like 6:30 till about noon there.
Uh-huh.
And I saw a lot of out-of-the-box type behavior. I was really impressed with how kind, how informative, and how knowledgeable. You know, they seek questions and they seek feedback, and they're interested in what you have to say and what you think about the place. They followed up with a phone call, that type of stuff. So the behavior side of Trident made me formulate a more favorable opinion than what I had. For
Now, you just want to
years
get that
past.
thing fixed, whatever the thing is, right?
Right.
Medically?
Right.
But it's amazing
But-
how disparate your opinion can be if they are short
Right.
with you and gruff on one end as opposed to what you just described.
It was just pleasant and nice, you know, the I call it the waiting room, you know, the nurse that preps you and does the IV and all that stuff. Very, very cordial, very, very nice, patient, kind, all those nice fancy words that you can come up with, you know. for the
I will
first
bet you
staff.
that
I
didn't
was
happen by
surprised.
accident.
I was surprised, so they take feedback and you know, patient surveys, you know, because I had to fill out one of those online survey things for them, and like I said, they followed up with a phone call, any questions, concern, you know, because they've learned from previous, because there are people out like me that have preconceived opinions
Sure.
in the past that were on the negative side, that they've really improved from what I can tell.
Like I said, I can't
So-
prove it, but I will bet you that kind of cultural change doesn't happen accidentally.
Right.
Okay, you were gonna say?
So,
I found kind of how you start your day. Like
Mhm.
if you listen to something that's good on your way to work,
Mhm.
it helps you kind of either stay away from the box
Mm-hmm.
or not go to the box. But
Okay.
let's say you get into a clique where you're listening to the wrong stuff that's kind of negative.
Mm-hmm.
I think not only do you come to work really tight inside of a box, but you also bring other people around you into that same atmosphere because of your actions.
And that's not just at work.
Yeah.
You do that at home just as easily.
Yeah.
You can do that wherever you are.
If you start blaming people, then,
Well,
well,
yeah.
it just sucks people in to do the
Yeah,
same thing.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's a,
And it just, sometimes it could be a difference of what you listen to. You listen to some, like the serious stuff,
Mhm.
and it just disheartened you, but you became very negative,
Mm-hmm.
you know, or you're listening to like something that's positive on the radio, that somebody did something for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just, it's situationally, sometimes you can go into the box and pull people in,
Sure.
and you don't even realize it.
Oh, yeah. Did you have your hand up?
Regarding getting pulled into the box or whatever, or another part that pops out is, okay, I'm in the box, but now I realize I'm in the box, suddenly I'm out of the box. Being kind of the equivalent, I guess, of I'm aware of the emotion that's driving my behavior.
But
that
you gotta
has
do
me in the
something
box.
too. You can't just be aware. You have to go
And-
make things right.
I'm aware of it, and I'm internalizing it, and all of a sudden I'm getting out of the box.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I think a really awesome illustration that I just thought of just now. I hadn't thought
Oh,
about this.
okay, let's hear your awesome illustration.
But Jesus on the cross
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes.
is a great example of being outside of the box
Okay.
and forgiving those who are hurting him, not thinking begrudgingly about other people or
It's true.
taking it personally, but thinking about them as
Very
actual people, and caring about the greater good rather than myself as a person.
It's a great example.
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess.
Somebody top that.
I can't
I
top
guess to
that.
add to that,
Can't top that, I can't
I
touch
guess to
that.
add to that, Jesus is doing that because he knows that it's what these people need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm. So everybody else who just had an illustration is now like, I'm not
That's
saying
right.
anything. Okay, so let's move along. So we're gonna wrap up Who's Imposter. We're going to wrap up leadership and self-deception, Lord Actum's dictum, Hayek, Madison, and we're gonna tie everything together. We will look at your presentation of what you have done over the course of the semester, and that's it. So we're in chapter 10, recognizing contributions. So, exemplary leaders elicit high performance because they strongly believe in the abilities of their constituents to achieve even the most challenging goals. If you have had a manager or boss that has believed in your ability, and you've ever compared that to someone who thought very little of you, if anything at all, if they were thinking of you, right? There's a world of difference between those two emotions. Do you believe in your people? How do they know that you believe in them? What have you done to show others that you believe in them when you were in a leadership position? Go ahead.
Do the opposite of micromanaging them.
Yeah, right.
Micromanaging.
Good. Flesh that out, because this is important. Because micromanagers sometimes think that they're like doing an awesome job by micromanaging, and they're doing the worst thing they could possibly do. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I feel insecure, I'm afraid, blah, 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 blah. I really don't know that they can get this done, or I don't know that they can get it done right, so I gotta get more involved in this and just stand there and watch them and constantly talk to them about, coerce them, all that, because I've gotta protect me.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. So they're getting more involved because of them, not because of you.
Yep.
It's not that you've asked, hey boss, can I have help? No, they're just getting involved because they're afraid you're not going to do it, and they're screaming distrust in the process.
Yep.
Right? Okay. How else have you? No, let me ask. How have you shown your people that you believe in them? Because that's a negative example.
well, just what you were saying, like, if you're leading somebody, like I've had a supervisor that is regularly, you know, because I'm the subject matter expert in a certain area,
Mhm.
and they'll bring me into a meeting to speak to that, to help them discuss whatever issue's going on,
Sure.
because they don't know it's that, you know, they believe me that way,
Okay.
so.
So, is that how they have shown that they believe in you?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
To give me confidence in my knowledge.
Good.
of
Okay.
it.
Good. How?
Acknowledging they're not the subject matter expert.
Gotcha. When they have the power. Now, having the power doesn't mean that you have the knowledge, and they're recognizing that, right? In a meritocracy, we would take the guy with the greatest knowledge and bring him in and say, "Ooh, tell us, how do we do this?" Right? Okay. Not all organizations are meritocracies. Sometimes you have what's his name, Eric Schmidt at Google, called hippos. The highest paid person's opinion prevails. Yeah, that's not the greatest way to make a decision, right? Because the highest paid person's opinion is not necessarily right, right?
True, very
So
true.
just because you have hippos doesn't mean that you're going to actually get to the right answer. Okay. Do you believe in your people? How do you know that you believe in them? Who's shown that somehow? How?
I'll
Go ahead.
allow my engineers to lead a project,
Mm-hmm.
even though, just they wanna take the opportunity to do it, to show
Mhm.
that they can. And I'll just be like, yep, sure, you can lead, and it'll go whichever one. I don't, I won't treat them differently. I'll let any of them lead a certain project if they so choose to.
Okay.
And take that.
Yeah, having faith in them in order to do that. And now, as a leader, you probably need to take an extra step behind that and look and think, okay, look, he's got plenty of projects, he's got plenty of projects, but he's kind of young. I need to make sure I get him into something so he can grow. You need to be thinking proactively on that, toward that end. Now, you also need to not crash and burn. So at the same time, while you're thinking of how you're going to grow him, you gotta make sure that he has everything that he needs, that he's ready for the challenge, that you're grooming him into that position, that kind of thing.
We did that well with Kevin. He put our video together, so we let him lead. and
All right.
Take on that
I'm sorry, I
responsibility.
think I've grown into my role here.
Okay, well, that's yet to be determined.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, we'll see. We'll see. Okay, the Pygmalion Effect. You know what the Pygmalion Effect is? Some of you have are in an older category that might actually know what we're talking about here with My Fair Lady, the movie. Who has not seen My Fair Lady? You've not?
I don't know if I have or not. I probably have, but.
You just don't remember because you're old enough that you should remember, but
Yeah.
It sounds
maybe.
familiar.
Yeah. So the premise was this professor in England. This is, I don't know, 100 years ago or something, but he's talking to a friend, he's making a bet, hey, I could turn any ordinary woman here in the street into a grand dame, and all I have to do is you just have to give me a few weeks to work with her, and so he makes a bet. And so he finds this, Audrey Hepburn is this lady that when she starts is and she's talking with this terrible accent, and he's working on enunciation and how she's supposed to carry herself like a lady and all the other things. But he believes in her, and in that belief is a transformation. That's the idea behind the Pygmalion Effect. Show them you believe. If you want your people to be winners, you have to behave in ways that communicate that they are winners. If over the course of the semester we assign you the same project that I'm looking forward to, that I think is going to be a good job, but if I assign it to you and I communicate it to you all semester, this isn't really going to work. I mean, I know I assigned it to you, but you can't really do this, right? What would happen?
I can't put the effort in.
Yeah, no, and you'd have at least you'd at least be off balance from that terrible message being sent, right? Okay. So what are your department's ground? So high performance isn't sustainable unless people are clear about what the ground rules are and the outcomes. So can you give me some examples of what are the ground rules and outcomes in your departments?
Well, what comes to mind is social norms.
Okay, go ahead.
As a group.
Yeah, go ahead.
In other words, knowing what each other is willing to tolerate,
Mhm.
know what the group is going to tolerate, what the group really wants, what they encourage.
Good.
And compliance without these bureaucratic rules.
So you're speaking generally. In different organizations, it's going to work out differently. It's going to work out with me and my professor friends differently than it will in your organization. So with us, hey, look, we want to hold up high standards. If any one of us is, just passing someone just to pass someone, that person's going to be a pariah, right? We want to hold up high standards because we want your degrees to matter. Yeah? Okay, so that's a fair norm for us. So what's that kind of norm or ground rule with you?
In the software testing world that I live in right now, is everything we do starts with a test plan. It
Okay.
tells you the who, what, where, when, and why.
Okay.
Of what we're gonna do, when we're gonna do it, who's gonna be part of it, what environments are, you know, involved, what the configuration is gonna look like. Everything is in a test plan.
Okay.
And then associated with that are test scripts and test cases that we run and to execute the plan to verify that it meets requirements.
Okay, and pretty much everyone in your department goes, oh, yeah, this is how we're supposed to do this. Nobody's going, oh, I didn't know we had to test anything.
Right. Oh, no.
Really? I just thought I had to bring it in and show it. It's,
Right.
right? No, nobody's, right? Okay, what else?
Our stuff has to be accurate.
Accuracy.
So,
Yes.
yes, if you are on my team and you do a test, or you do anything, whatever you write in there has to be accurate.
Okay.
We do not produce any documents or test or
Yeah.
anything that we do we have to be able to back it.
Okay.
So if a vendor comes at us, we can say, this is what happened, we have the proof, we
Mhm.
can show you, but it has to be, you have to take notes, you have to be accurate. Yeah, we have 8 papers that we write per,
Yeah.
and it's,
And then,
Okay.
of
You
course,
have
when
to-
we're finished, then we have our test report.
Yeah.
Which we report the results and the execution, whether it passed or failed,
Mhm.
or if it was inconclusive, or whatever the status of
Yeah.
each of those test scripts and test cases are.
Okay,
So we have a, you know, proven result.
any of you?
The norm in our department is open communication.
Okay,
If I feel very comfortable going to my supervisor and him to me if we have anything that we need to talk about. In terms of problems, like I have his number, he has mine, we can text each other. If it's late at night, I could call him. It's unlikely that I ever do that, but I know that I could if I was at an event and I was really having trouble with something, or if there's an emergency, and I wouldn't think twice about it.
okay. That norm is not the norm in many organizations. Many will say, yes, we have an open door policy, but nobody's using the open door policy. And there's a reason nobody's using that open door policy, because we don't trust you, right?
That's right.
In spite of what you might say about having that, it's not used unless, if it's not used, nobody trusts you. I mean, let's put it that way.
Common one, I'll look back to the military, where you'll get a commanding officer that says, yeah, or first sergeant, whatever, that says, I have an open door policy,
Mhm.
but all the enlisted in the middle of the chain of command say, no, you're not gonna go in there,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Same.
blocking them off.
yeah, same thing, right? Okay. Give regular feedback. There's a study, hundreds of participants, praise, criticism, or no feedback. Those are the 3 conditions. Those without feedback were as affected as much as those criticized. So if you turn in your work and you're, well, if you're praised, you know you feel good, right?
Yeah.
If you turn in your work and you're criticized, you know you feel bad. But if you turn in your work and you got no feedback, you felt just as bad as if you had been criticized.
Because you're not important.
Isn't that amazing,
Yeah.
right? You just poured your blood, sweat, and tears into whatever it is that you're turning in, and nothing, crickets. You're laughing.
Well, I shouldn't be.
Okay.
But approximately 11 days ago, we turned in our team paper,
Mhm.
and we're kind of like interested in what the result might be. It's kind of a segue. So I was just sitting here thinking about that.
Talking about my team paper?
Yeah, no, our team paper that we're waiting for
Yeah.
the grade.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
What is Christian about Christian leadership?
Yeah. So you should be getting that. I didn't turn that back, did I? Okay, so we're gonna edit this part of the
Not the-
audio.
Well, we were just giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I will get that back to you. So, it's not something that you will
That's
not
an
get.
That's
It's
an
not-
example.
I'm sorry for the delay, but it's not something that you're not gonna get,
Oh, I
right? You'll get, and I make sure, so there's a balancing act on my end, right? And so there's a speed versus, quality or quantity of meaningful feedback, right? And if you've seen on your papers, I probably bleed on it more than you like,
That's okay.
generally, yes?
Can't improve.
But in bleeding on it, you at least are getting to see that. Okay, so thanks for the black eye.
No,
Okay.
just-
Um,
No harm intended.
I'll have that to you. Maybe I should revise it first before I turn it out. I'll go back over it very carefully.
No, you just wanted them to focus on the project.
Yes, that's right. I just wanted you to focus on what you're submitting tonight.
That's right.
That's, yeah, okay. Recognition should be personalized, otherwise it will be quickly forgotten and discounted. So how do you personalize recognition? You ever done that? Or how has a boss personalized recognition for you?
I have Air Force examples.
Okay, go ahead.
Nothing outside of there.
That's
You know,
fine.
in the Air Force has got a lot of, ceremonies and recognition programs, and we have what they call Airman of the Month or NCO of the Month, and then those you know, every month you try to have one of your people compete against the other sections in your squadron, for example,
Mhm.
compete for Airman of the Month. We'll use that as an example. That's the lower ranking guys. And, you know, those are the guys that are in training or learning how to do their job on their own. Maybe they're going to school to work on their associate's degree or something, because that's highly encouraged. So what we try to do is find one of those people that do extracurricular activities or do some kind of Habitat for Humanity or other volunteerism type things, so they can be competitive against somebody else's airmen.
Okay.
So, you know, I would always try to have somebody to submit every month. That was the first goal, was to try to get somebody to,
Okay.
you know, to compete. And then when they win at the monthly level, then the 3 monthly winners go against each other at the quarterly level, and then it, you know, turned into an annual award at the end.
Gotcha.
too. So,
So how do they personalize recognition? Do they get a plaque or a certificate or something, or?
They do.
Okay.
They get some kind of, it depends on the different level. The higher the level, the better the recognition goes.
Sure,
of
okay,
course.
that stands to
So,
reason. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's.
When we send out our sales report every week,
Mhm.
I will go through it, and whoever the top performers are, I'll call them out personally by name
Okay,
and tell them
Yeah.
good job on what they did. And then at the end of the quarter, whenever we go over, incentive plan and like what they've won,
mhm,
we list out the person's name and how much they won for each category that they, you know, win.
okay,
So
Okay.
they know what they've done,
there
and
you
then
go.
it
So
inspires other people too.
Okay.
back to our monthly winners, that we'd also have what they call a commander's call, where the squadron commander has all 200 of his people in an auditorium or in a room somewhere, and then that's where the recognition part, you know, how to publicly praise, you know, Airman Jones won Airman of the Month this month, you know, stuff like that.
Okay,
I do
So,
weekly meetings,
okay,
and people didn't like them at first.
mhm,
And during the weekly meetings, I make sure that I recognize every single member of the team with something that was done well.
that's really, how many people are on the team?
15.
Wow, you have to work at that.
Yeah, and they, now, like I sent out an email today, like, hey, that we have so many people out, do you guys not wanna have a meeting? And like, everyone came back and said, we think the meetings are useful, and we should have a meeting.
Hmm.
Like, 4 months ago,
That's
it
good.
was, we shouldn't have the meeting.
That is right there, let me praise you, because that right there is a phenomenal thing, if you can get your people to think that your meetings are useful.
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, I don't
Everybody
mean
hates
trickery
meetings.
or witchcraft, that's not what I'm
Right.
saying, but if you're doing your meetings so well that they think that they're useful, even Drucker talks about meetings being a sign that you're not efficient,
Yeah.
right? Even Peter Drucker's doing that, so that you're doing that you're getting they're getting something out of those meetings, as opposed to
Yeah.
sitting there and being bored out of their mind, or wishing they weren't there, or trying to surreptitiously check their phone, or whatever else. Right, anybody else? Okay, well, I got some examples then. So this was something that we had, just because, created, some years ago. So Janie was, not the, so Rachel at the time was the assistant graduate programs director, and, Janie was just advising, and we were creating these things out of thin air, right? Whole cloth, these little awards to this professor or whoever, and just because she was doing a great job, and so we created that. It didn't cost us anything except for a few minutes to create the thing and a piece of paper and some ink. But she was very pleased to be recognized, even if it was a silly thing where she recognized that it was just us. Like Rachel and I were like the people that decided and awarded it. Right? Not a big thing, but still, it's nice to be recognized. How many of you, show of hands, do not like to be recognized?
Yeah, positive.
I saw one scratching of the nose and no hands, right? No, everybody likes to be recognized, right? When Rachel then left, she went over to the registrar's office and worked over there for a number of years. I got all the faculty together and we took that picture,
Oh, cool.
which sat on her, like she had a dresser, not dresser, what do you call it, a file cabinet thing. She had a file cabinet in her office and it sat there prominently, so the first thing you'd see when you walked in. Right?
Cool.
Yeah, who doesn't like to be recognized? Recognizing contributions. Proximity is a single best predictor of whether two people will talk, get close enough to find out what motivates them, what they like and don't like, and what kinds of recognition they most appreciate. Who's right around you, immediately around you. Those are the people that you're going to be. Right? And I think back to that, when I read that, I first thought, wow, when I think back to my closest friends from college, they all lived on my dorm. Like, I was too lazy to go beyond that. To this day, my closest friends are the ones that were, within a stone's throw of my room in one of the 4 dorms that I lived in college. It's bizarre. Does familiarity breed contempt? What do you think? How close is getting too close to your people? Because I'm telling you, care about your people, right?
Right.
So how close is too close? What's too much care? What's not enough care? Where's the line?
Well, I guess what comes into mind is it's too much care if it doesn't add value. Meaning if I tell them certain things about me that are negative or whatever that aren't actually gonna improve anything, that's too much.
You're just being open for the sake of being open?
Aimless.
Like you're confessing for no reason?
Aimless,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay. So that's probably a bad plan. What else?
I think it depends on the individual.
Okay, that's fair.
You know,
Well, and especially if it's the same amount of, like, if it's not intentional to each individual, if it's just like a blanket openness to everyone, I don't know if that would be.
Sure, and what you're talking about is LMX too, right? I mean, the leader-member exchange, some people are gonna be closer than other people, right? So some people deserve that level of closeness. Okay, somebody else had a hand or something over here. No? Go ahead.
Yeah, like, where I find myself drawing the line is when it crosses over to more like a friendship versus a professional relationship.
But don't you wanna be friends with the people that you have to work with all day long?
it's not required.
Yeah, but you don't want them, I guess, to be so close that they're gonna kind of blow off tasks that need to
Yeah,
have
so
deadlines.
it's great to be friends with them, it's great to care about them, but you still have to, you have this relationship, and if they cross this line, then the professional relationship has to come first is that fair? That doesn't mean you can't be kind to them all the way through. Hold yourself for just a little bit, I wanna show you something. I was just, over the weekend, I was watching Ike. It was a movie about Eisenhower what he was experiencing as he was leading up into D-Day and just beyond D-Day, right? Now, Eisenhower had to deal with all kinds of egos. You think about all the collected Allied generals, and he's the supreme commander of them. And he has to kind of, massage this ego or that ego and try to get others to work together and play nice. The bad guys are there, not us, right? It's the Nazis, it's not the English or the British or the French, right? And so he's trying to hold it together. Well, at one point in the movie, it's just before D-Day, and one of his, I think it was a 2-star general, is in a restaurant talking about the date of the invasion. Right? Like, okay, this is supposed to be a secret, nobody's going, we're going to invade on such and such time, and there's a first lieutenant, and you saw from his patch he's airborne, a first lieutenant who's about to make the drop, who reports this guy because, it's not bad enough that his percentage or odds of surviving are bad enough, but, that's with surprise.
Yeah.
So that's where we come to this scene where Eisenhower then has to wrestle with what's going on here.
Grill. That place is packed that time of night. What the hell was you thinking? Had too much to drink. Henry Miller is a major general, Peter. Entertaining his dinner guests with inside knowledge is a betrayal of the many commands. Of course. Now, Chapman, get on with this. A junior officer from the 101st is at the next table. He contacted his CO. Won't you speak to the officer personally? Yeah. First Lieutenant, young man from Philadelphia. Feels awful about the whole thing. Didn't want to be thought of as a snitch. But he said he commanded a platoon of airborne infantry. And he figured his chances were bad enough without making it easier for their colonels. And he's a damn sight better officer than Miller. And smart. Henry was a roommate at West Point.
Catch that? General with the mouth was his roommate at West Point, one of his closest friends.
I do.
If you haven't figured it out, Tom Selleck is IQ.
Ready? Mike, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what got into me. I do. I swear, I'll never touch another drop. Fine. So what do you do with me? What do you think? Oh, please. Mike. Don't do this to me. Go back too far. We're friends. You can't cut me loose. It might be easier for you to have so much history, Hank. The stakes are way too big. You'll have to go home. Immediately, and we won't be coming back. We'll both owe that to the man who'll be dead in a few weeks. I'll lose my operational rank. I'll go home in disgrace, a major. You can't send me home. You owe me something. I'm part of the inner circle. That's the worst thing you could have said, Hank. There is no inner circle, only those who live and those who die. And you don't seem to get that. Send him home immediately. Lost the theater rank. Try to keep him a colonel if you can. And on his record? Be more useful at HQ. Skills not needed in theater of operation. The thing about whole power, Beetle. It isn't the big decisions that weigh heavy. Hell, you decide to invade Russia at dinner. Pick Waterloo for battle on a whim. It's the details, the small stuff. It's easy to gamble a million lives. What's hard is to see how that can hurt one single person. And if you can't keep that straight, no. You'll lose your humanity.
Catch that?
The details.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to make the big decisions. It's very hard to look at how that affects that individual. In another class, we were talking about a case where, no, I'm not going to tell you about that. I'm going to save that for the other class. You just have to show up in another class. Okay. What do you think of what you saw here?
He did his job.
Yeah, he did his job, right? Could he be friends with the guy? Sure, but he crossed that line, and the role that he's in. Sorry, this is what I have to do. It's my role because of what you chose to do. No, you can't do this to me. We're friends. We're friends is irrelevant, right? Now I can treat you well. He was even kind to him, trying to keep him a colonel.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
But we're friends is not the criterion. The role that we're in between boss and employee or whatever else, that's what defines us. Now within that, as long as you don't cross it, we can be friends. That's okay. Now we can't be too tight, or we can't. But we, right? Did he show the role clearly?
Yeah.
What else do you think about this?
I think it was in the servant leadership book.
Okay.
And it talked about a CEO who would fire the bottom 10% or whatever of performers.
Uh huh. Well,
And people thought that was so mean of him, but he
Uh-huh.
said it's a meaner thing to let them stay on and believe that they are actually producing.
With the mortgage and the family and stuff.
Yeah.
And then.
Yeah, I run into this sometimes where I get students that are not prepared to be here. And, they just came from a decent named school with a decent GPA, and now they get here and, well, you're so hard. I'm really not hard. I'm just faithfully towing the line of where you should be, right? I'm really not trying to turn the screws on you. I'm just trying to make sure that you're doing what you should be. And if you're not, I'll even help you try to get the remedial thing that you need. But if they're blindsided, somebody was lying to them along the way. That's unkind, not what I'm doing.
Right, agreed.
And that's unacceptable in the military.
And he's looking at the big picture. Like, people are going to die here. It's unfair to those people that are going to die. Maybe die because of you, and you stick around. What? So he's walked that line very nicely. Anybody else want to comment on what you just saw? I'm sorry for the sound on that.
I'm surprised that he didn't put in a thing there to say, oh, and you're gonna be retiring within 3 months, because when you look at that colonel, he's just in no mindset to deal with anybody under him.
Yeah, I mean that's a hard place to be. You're a roommate from West Point.
Yeah.
And you're the supreme commander. But you know what? What was interesting to me was when his roommate said, "Come on, we go back. We're friends. Like something like I deserve better. You owe me."
Or
wow. And he said, like, that's the wrong thing to say.
and I don't understand the seriousness of how many people could die because of what I did.
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Yeah.
in my
Like,
opinion.
or look, whatever I deserve. Help me do something to make this up to the blood that's on my hands. That would have been the right thing to say.
Yep.
You know what I find is really interesting is I've never seen somebody who shirks responsibility to be successful. Never. I mean, not in the long run. I mean, they might have a temporary advantage by
temporary.
dodging something, but I've never seen long-term success by people who are like really adept at dodging responsibility.
Yep.
It's a fascinating thing to watch. Anybody else before I move on?
I think it's hard though, because even if you don't have that friendship, it's hard enough to, like people in your platoon or whatever, and that's underneath your people that report back up to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard enough to do things that you know are going to affect them in
Yeah.
that kind of manner, but to add that.
Unless you're a
friendship-
psychopath, in which case you don't care.
Yep.
If you're a psychopath, some of the stuff's easy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, do you need to die? That's okay. All right, so you're in charge now because he's dead. Okay, right? I mean, if it's that easy, something's wrong with you,
Yeah.
right? Go ahead.
Yeah.
What else?
And I'm just, it just to have that bond and that friendship, or to have gone past that line you were talking about, cross that line where you
Mhm.
are friends, it's that would be impossible. I mean, a lot of people would not be able to do that, what he just did.
That's a pretty tough thing to do.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is. Now, there's another clip that I normally show about this same kind of subject when we're talking about where's that line. It's also from World War II. It's from Band of Brothers. This is this guy's name is he was the lieutenant, became the major. Winters. By the end of it, I don't know if anybody's seen the miniseries Band of Brothers. Great guy. This guy was talking about the guy that's speaking here, the guy whose face you see. I read his memoir years later, Beyond Band of Brothers, where he's talking about how while everybody else was trying, in England before the invasion, going to the pubs to release some steam, I was rereading the infantry manual because I figured if with just one more insight, I might preserve another life. That's who I want to follow. Does that make sense? I don't want to follow you
Yeah.
because you're going to make your name and my blood's going to be spilled. I want to follow him because he's going to do whatever. He'll read it 100 times if it can preserve one more life. I feel safe with him. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's his little bit where he's with his second in command in the platoon.
Worst possible circumstances. And they volunteered for it. Christ, Dick, I was just shooting crap through them. It's not like, I know why they volunteered. So when things got really bad, the man in the foxhole next to them would be the best. Not some draftee who's gonna get him killed.
Are you ticked because they like me?
Because I'm spending time to get to know my soldiers? I mean, come on. You've been with these guys for what, 2 years? I've been here for 6 days. The gambling bug, so what? Soldiers do that. I don't deserve a reprimand for it. What if you'd won? What if you'd won? Never put yourself in a position where you can take from these men.
Did you hear what he said?
I didn't catch the last couple words.
Okay, so he's reprimanding his executive officer for gambling with the men. And he said, well, I was just trying to get to know him. What if you'd won?
Yep.
What? Well, what if you'd won? Never put yourself in a position where you can take from your men. There's something really profound about that.
Yep.
Why? Because there's this asymmetrical relationship, and it's a little weird if if your boss says, hey, can you why don't you do this for me or do that for me? It's not easy to say no, right? What if you'd won? You just got to be careful with guarding that relationship with what might be expected from them. Does that make sense? Anybody
Yep.
have any thoughts?
Yep.
You're shaking your head yes. Anybody? Okay. Get close to people. Now, so you have to get close to people because you have to figure out where that line is of what you should or shouldn't, where that, the relationship should or shouldn't be. My senior manager took me out to dinner that evening and introduced me to the city and laid out my role and its expectations in the clearest way and most concise way possible. You're like the point guard on this team, he said. Gave me my dignity back. Why? Because he was explaining, this is how you fit, this is where you are, right? I understand where you are, you understand where you are, right? That's the kind of relationship we're after. Not that we're going to be besties, that's not it. And not that I'm just going to use you and spit you out. We don't want either of those extremes. Be creative about incentives. It's all about being considerate. The techniques that you use are less important than your genuine expression of caring. Do you genuinely care? In both the Eisenhower example and the Winters example, there was genuine caring.
Yeah.
Right?
When I was stationed in Germany, I was in a part of Germany, and it's called the Eifel region. It's over near the Luxembourg border, and it's the weather like it is outside here. It's about like that 6 months out of the year where there's a misty, just drizzly rain. It's just a dreary place, and it's kind of depressing at times. And overseas, you're kind of in a smaller little group anyway, because you got the outside, the Germans and the way they live is not the same way as Americans live. So I always made sure that whenever I had single guys that worked for me during, Easter, Christmas, Thanksgiving, stuff like that, I would try to invite some of them over to the house to eat and just to hang out with my family, just to, in a little bit of an appreciation for what they've done throughout the year, and just so they know that they have somebody that cares, somebody that cares for them and, is interested in them. And, since they don't have any family or nobody here, in Germany, I would, like I said, just bring someone over to the house for different celebrations, and they used to just be thrilled about it. But then, we go back to work the next week, and everything's just business as usual. Sure. But at least they knew that, I had a little, I cared for them a little bit.
Yeah, and I would imagine they saw you differently after that too. Right?
It reminds me of every time Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever came around, how I didn't like to see my married Marines get caught up on duty and all that. I would take their duty. Well, they could go and spend time with their wife, their family, and all that.
Sure.
Yeah. Good.
It's all about caring. How do we get out of the box? Well, this is an interesting little segue back into leadership and self-deception. So Tom talks about his evening with Laura and Todd, and I simply enjoyed being with them. Well, that's a good first step, right? Lou is genuinely interested in people. Although I'd been with Lou for only a minute or two, my nervousness had evaporated. I felt completely comfortable in his presence. Why?
Reminded him of his father that passed away 10 years earlier.
Yeah, but he also genuinely cared.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what was going on. Lou listened intently. The 2-day session in Arizona, he learned whatever my son's problems might be, that I is not a slash, that's an I being emphasized. I needed fixing too. right? You're in a system. I mean, if something's going wrong between you and another person, it may be you, it may be the other person, it may be neither of you, it may be just the system that you're in, because you've created a pattern, right? And so you have to work that out. He needed fixing too. I realized that my box had driven away not only my son, but also the most important people in my company. 5 of the 6 executive team members had left for better opportunities. Okay, when you have huge turnover, that's almost always a sign that something's wrong. If you can figure out what the norm is of turnover in your industry, because it might be different. I mean, if you're at McDonald's, that's different than if you're a consultant, right? Find out what the norm of turnover is in your industry, and if it's much higher than the norm, something is definitely wrong with your organization. And if you're in charge of it, something is definitely wrong in your office.
So do we need to be worried about the Trump administration, because the turnover rate up there and his staff is higher than anybody else?
Is it much higher than what it was with the Obama administration or the George W. Bush administration? Or
I think it is.
It seems like it is, but I think that's partly because we're aware of it now. It'd be interesting to take notes and compare.
Yeah.
I don't know that it is, but something's usually wrong if there's a very high turnover. I was determined to build Zagram into a success without them. They weren't that great anyway.
That was Lou, right?
But it was a lie. I was completely blind to my own role in our mediocrity. As a result, I was blind to how I was blaming them for their mistakes, but not for their mistakes, but for mine. I was blind, as we always are, to my own box. I saw myself a leader who was so sure of the brilliance of his own ideas that he couldn't allow brilliance in anyone else. Did you ever work for someone like that?
Yep.
Because if you outshine them, now they feel threatened. That's a terrible place to be. I was a mess because I was in the box. I was provoking the very problem I was complaining about. I had chased away the very best people I knew, feeling justified all the time because in my box, I was convinced that they weren't that good. My box was destroying everything that I cared about.
Self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes, I mean, he's creating it. When you feel that you want to be out of the box because you are seeing people as people, that's how you get out. Now, that doesn't mean that you actually are out, but you're on your way out. You have to make things right, and you have to continue to see them as people, because as soon as you slip back into it, you slip right back into the box. So what doesn't work in the box? Do you remember?
Communication.
If we just have better patterns of communication.
Any techniques, anything.
So, let me say it loud and clear. I think you're a loser. How's that work? No. He hears very loud and clear what I think, but that's not it. What else? What doesn't work in the box?
Trying to change others.
Yep.
Trying to change others. Every semester, not every semester, almost every semester, I'll have somebody that'll read this book and be like, I need to bring this home to my husband, or some equivalent, right? Whatever, husband, wife, whatever. Generally, guys aren't as quick to say something like that, because they're like, yeah, that's not gonna work. Right? Women are a little more optimistic about this kind of thing. What else?
It was the
Tolerating, just putting up with, that doesn't work. Okay, so let's look at it. 1, trying to change others. While it's true that others may have problems they need to solve, is that true? Sure it is.
Sure.
Other people have issues too, right?
Yep.
Are their problems the reason that I'm in the box? Nope. If I try to get out by changing others, I end up provoking others to give me reasons to stay in the box. That never works. 2, doing my best to cope. That's what you were just talking about. Cope with others. Coping has the same deficiency as trying to change others, the other person. It's just another way to continue blaming. It communicates the blame of my box, which invites those I'm coping with to be in their boxes. If I leave, the problem just goes with me. There you are. You are all the same bundle of problems, right? It's just a continuation of my box. I take self-justifying feelings with me. After self-betrayal, our reality is distorted. Communicating won't work because I'm not seeing clearly. In the box, whether I'm a skilled communicator or not, I end up communicating my box. And that's the problem. Implementing new skills or techniques. Will using a skill in the box be the best way to get out of the box? No, they just provide people with more sophisticated ways to blame others. Right? These people, the people problems that most people try to correct with skills aren't due to a lack of skill at all. They're due to self-betrayal. and changing my behavior in the box. Every change I can think of is just a change in my style of being in the box. It's manipulation, that's what it is. Others remain objects to me. You can't get out by continuing to focus on yourself, which is what you do when you try to change your behavior in the box. The way out of the box is always right before our eyes, because the people that we're resisting are right before our eyes. To see them as people. We need to honor them as people, and in that moment, the moment that I see another person with needs and hopes and worries as real, as legitimate as my own, I am out of the box toward him. What remains for me then is the question of whether I'm going to stay out. And how do you stay out? By continuing to see them as people and honoring them. All of us are both in and out of the box toward others. The more we can find our way out of the box, vantage points within us, the more readily we will be able to shine the light on the in-the-box justifications that we're carrying. Almost everyone at work betrays himself or herself in the same foundational way. When most people start a job, they want to do their best for the company and for the people in it, but interview those same people a year later and their feelings are usually very different. Right? Because now they've interacted, rubbed shoulders with, and had in-the-box experience with some of those crazies that they work with. When we blame because of ourselves, not because of others. Do we get in the box because other people are in their boxes? No, we get in the box through self-betrayal. Nobody can put you in the box. They can encourage you, they can invite you, but nobody can put you there. You have to self-betray in order to get there. Chuck Staley talks about Chuck Staley leaders. You can see how damaging an in-the-box leader can be. It makes it all too easy for others to revert to their boxes. You need to be a different kind of leader. That's your obligation as a leader. Your success as a leader depends on being free of self-betrayal. What do you think of that?
Yep.
Lou's initial steps towards Zagram's success. Lou's apology to Kate. She could tell that I meant it. Lou's two-step plan for Zagram was to institute a process in the company that keeps people out of the box. And three phases of implementation. Phase 1 was the BUD meeting. Phase 2 is the accountability transformation system. And as a result, a culture of blame, so that that is so prevalent in organizations, is replaced with a culture of deep responsibility taking and accountability. So that's the whole point of the story, was the BUD meeting. You'll need to rethink your work, learn to measure things you never knew you needed measuring, and help and report people in ways you've never thought of. You will learn to hold yourself accountable in a deep and disciplined ways. As your manager, I will help you do all this. And as your manager, you will learn how to help your people do the same. What's that? That's called leading by example, right? Yes. I'm going to show you how to do it, and then you're going to do the same thing. You'll discover through it all that there is no better way to work or to live. So how do you live this material? How do you make this useful to you? Because it's a nice story, but unless you use it, that's not going to be very useful. Okay? Don't try to be perfect. Do try to be better. It's kind of like I was reading I don't remember where this was, something about dieting or eating right food or being more healthy or something. Look, if you can choose something that's slightly better than the bad choice you're about to make, that's better.
That's a step.
Right? If you can choose something slightly better than that, even better. So you don't have to go from eating a donut to eating a rug. Right? The rug tasting piece of plain bread that you don't want to eat.
Take this
Okay,
rice crackers.
Just move a little bit closer. Could be,
Yep.
Honey wheat. Great,
Small victory.
Yeah, move the right direction.
That's right.
Don't try to be perfect, do try to be better. Don't use the vocabulary in the box. Ha ha, you're in the box. Right? That's not going to help anybody.
People look at you like, what?
And so on. With people who don't already know it, do use the principles in your own life. Don't look for others' boxes. Do look for your own. Okay? Forget about the ha-ha, you're in the box. I'm in the box. And if I fix me, then I go a long way to helping others, to release them. Don't accuse others of being in the box. Do try to stay out of the box yourself. Don't give up on yourself when you discover that you've been in the box. Do keep trying. Don't deny that you've been in the box when you have been. Do apologize, and then just keep marching forward, trying to be more helpful to others in the future. God bless you. Don't focus on what others are doing wrong. Do focus on what you can do to do right to help. Don't worry whether others are helping you. Do worry whether you are helping others. What does that sound like? Whether you're helping others.
Going back to the servant leadership.
Remember manager? What do you say? You're the right thing.
If you feel depressed, go help someone.
Go help others, right? okay? Studies show that work teams in which the ratio of positive, that's the end of here with the leadership and self-deception. What do you think of what you read there? And what do you gain from that? Any other final thoughts before I move back on to who's an imposter?
Going through the whole thing, it reminds me so much of EQ, but not talking about EQ when it
Right.
comes to being aware of yourself and aware of others.
It's a very simple way to explain that,
Yep.
right? What else?
I noticed with even my wife and daughter, when you're trying to be a leader in the family or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, and it's so much easier to notice what they're doing wrong.
Oh, yeah.
To not make it work.
Yep.
It is.
So your wife can see what's wrong with you and you can see what's wrong with her, but you can't see what's wrong with you and she can't see what's wrong with her very well.
I notice when you pray for yourself to have eyes opened and figure out what needs to be done, it usually works out a lot better than praying for them too.
And it's
Be
hard,
better.
and honestly, it's hard at home.
Yeah.
Let me just, so you're married, right?
Yes.
Married, no, married, right?
I was in the box Sunday.
Yeah, so I've been in and out of the box my entire
My wife
entire
could tell I
marriage.
was in
Like,
the
I don't
box,
mean to
too.
be, but she says something and then I say, well, what about whatever? And that's always a bad thing to just come back to whatever. Or, I'm trying honestly to help, but I am not hearing her. I'm trying to solve it, or I'm trying to not make it, or keep it from getting bad. Trying to keep something from getting bad is like the worst thing I can do, right? Because then she feels minimized and not heard, and then she's in the box, I get sucked into my box, and it becomes bad. I didn't want that to happen, but that's that's the pattern, that's the system that we were just talking about. You were about to say?
Yeah, I obviously did this book the first time,
Mhm.
and I loved it so much, because it's really eye-opening.
Mhm.
And so my boyfriend right now is in Qatar, and it's his first deployment. He's a first lieutenant, so he's like a baby officer, and he's struggling with a lot of things, and he keeps asking my advice, but then when I tell him, I can tell he's very frustrated with my response, and then later he's like, yeah, you were right. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna send you this book to read. So I said, don't ask me any more questions after you read this. Because he's definitely in the box.
He's
And
in the
I
box.
can't be like, you're in the box. Because he's not gonna understand it. But yeah, I just thought that this book was really eye-opening in that manner. So I hope that he receives it well.
Yeah. So, and the upside in your story is that you're helping him deal with the in the box and out the box with somebody else. Because it would fall terribly flat if it was like, you don't understand me, read this book, right?
Yeah, it's not
It's
between
hard
us,
to, it's hard to fix something that's that close, right? It's hard to, okay, so we've spent now, most of the semester together. I like most of you, I hope you like me, but we have a relationship that's kind of at arm's distance, right? I mean, like, I'm trying to be helpful and I want to see your growth, but honestly, I don't have to go home and live with you, right?
True.
And so you don't necessarily see me as me, like when I first get up in the morning and have morning breath and my hair's like that, right? And you don't have to live with, no, seriously, you don't have to live with the me that is the true me. You get to see, I was gonna say, you get to see the best side of me. And I'm thinking like, this is as good as it gets? Yeah, this is as good as it gets. But you don't have to see the me that's tired, and when you're tired, you're cranky. And I have 6 kids, and they just kill me. I mean, they're just
I
kicking my
believe
butt,
you.
right? So, but my wife, she sees the real thing, right? There's a difference between that and out here where it's this professional distance, right? I mean, I hope I'm doing the right thing in the way that I raise my kids and the way that I deal with her, but she'll see the real thing. You'll get this, polished professional version. I was saying that to say something, and I can't remember what it was now. But I know what it was. It's hard at home. It's harder to lead at home than it is at work.
Mhm.
It's much harder because you're seeing that real thing, right? The closer you are to your people, and this is one of the reasons that some people don't want to get close to their people, because the closer you are, it can get harder. Think of Ike, right?
Yes.
Whereas if you just keep this distance, it's not that hard, but you also can't maximize what you can get from that relationship. Go ahead.
This is reminding me so much of my relationship with my teenage daughter.
Uh-huh.
I do, I have to work pretty hard to keep myself out of the box.
I understand.
Because with her, I mean, she's quite opinionated.
Yep,
And being in the box doesn't work at all with her.
I understand. I understand. Okay, so back to Koustis and Posner. Just say thank you. Studies show that work teams in which the ratio of positive to negative interactions is greater than 3 to 1 are significantly more productive than those teams that haven't achieved this ratio. So here's the thing: positive to negative ratio. 3 positives for every 1 negative at work. Now, what's fascinating about this is John Gottman found that you need a 5 to 1 ratio at home. Now, I was just talking about how much harder it is at home because of my morning breath and my hair up like that and whatever else when I first wake up, and just being tired and cranky because my children are outnumbering me significantly. So here's John Gottman talking about the same kind of thing.
Let me start by talking about what it is we learned that allows us to predict divorce or stability with very high accuracy. The first thing we found was that if you take...
By the way, he can predict whether you're going to get divorced with like a 90% accuracy rate. Just by having you over for a weekend in his little lab. Just watching you interact.
Wish there were more of him then.
Look at the ratio of positive stuff during conflict. Things like interest, asking questions, being nice to one another, being kind, being affectionate, being empathetic. And you look at all the negative stuff like criticism, hostility, anger, hurt feelings, and you take the ratio of positive to negative. In relationships that stay together, that ratio turns out to be 5 to 1. There's 5 times as many positive things going on in relationships that work as negative. So that's an interesting equation. And it sort of suggests that if you do something negative to hurt your partner's feelings, that you have to make up for it with 5 positive things. So the equation is not balanced in terms of positive and negative. Negative has a lot more ability to inflict pain and damage than positive things have to heal and bring you closer. Now, the couples who wound up divorced, that ratio was 0.8 to 1. So there was a little more negativity than positivity in couples who were...
Wow. Interesting. 0.8 to 1.
Wow. Not even.
Yeah, but that doesn't sound like it's much. I mean, that sounds pretty balanced, right?
I'd hate to see
But
that.
balance isn't balanced here.
Yeah.
How would you like to, every other day, you're happy with your boss or ticked at him? How would you enjoy that?
You don't.
And that's just at that professional distance, right?
Yeah.
That's not at home, where you have to live with the person and you can't get away from them, right? 5 to 1. Now, so if you imported that 5 to 1 to work, you're a superstar, right? Chapter 11, celebrate values and victories. Okay, create a spirit of community. A leader who ignores or impedes organizational ceremonies and considers them as frivolous or not cost effective is ignoring the rhythms of history. David Campbell, Center for Creative Leadership. Good line, right?
Yeah.
Oh, why should we have this celebration? It costs too much to have this little party. Wait a minute. If the party is in line with celebrating what, I get it. If a party is because it's St. Patrick's Day, that might not be useful. I get that. But if it's because you celebrate a milestone, because you achieve some success, parties spend the money because you're reinforcing your values.
Yep.
What if the values at the party aren't very in line with your values?
Okay, so if you're talking about if everybody's getting drunk and, taking pictures of his butts on the copier, that's different. I mean celebrating the victory,
Yeah.
celebrating, you just completed a big project, hey, we're bringing in cakes and whatever else, and congratulations guys, I know you worked really hard on this and you should be rightly proud of yourself. That's different than getting drunk because it's Cinco de Mayo, okay? There's a difference. So here it's got to be in line with the organizational values. Public events are an opportunity to showcase real examples of what it means to do what we say and say what we'll do. A close friend at work. How many of you have a close friend at work or have had a close friend at work?
Of course.
Right? If you do, life's a lot better. If you don't, it feels like a little on the empty side, doesn't it? Okay, people who don't like the folks that they're working with don't stay around very long. So what have you done to create an environment of social support? What might you do in the future to do it?
Have empathy for others.
Okay?
I make sure that people work with different people all the time.
Okay, good.
Diversity.
Cross-pollinating a bit?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Fun, or invest in fun. Fun isn't a luxury, even at work. Now you gotta be careful with this, because mandatory fun, that stupid stuff that like you have real work to do, but we're requiring you to do mandatory fun, that often backfires. Okay? People simply feel better about their work when they're doing, the work they're doing when they enjoy the people that they're working with. Right? In a similar vein, I remember reading a psychologist that said nobody has fun on the way to get a divorce, on the way to the courthouse to get a divorce. Like nobody's like, hey, this is a great time, let's go do that. No, they're because right.
It's a
Same. It's a parallel thing. What you preach and what you celebrate must be one and the same. Okay? So if you're preaching about quality, you have to celebrate quality, not quantity, or vice versa.
Yep.
Right? How have you celebrated your values? That's a question. How have you celebrated values? How have you seen this done well?
Yeah, I think with me and my students, I value effort.
Okay?
Like, probably even
Good.
like
You're
more so
young,
than
you can
success.
fall down, you can screw up, but you tried. And that's what I value. And as long as if that message is consistent, guess what? They'll get up and dust themselves off and try again. Right? Good. What else?
Doing the right thing, even if it's painful,
Mhm.
celebrating that.
Okay?
Just simply a talking in terms of saying I'm proud of you or this or that, the intangible.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Don't do any celebrating at work.
You don't do any celebrating? Oh.
Nope.
Okay. Show you care. One of the most significant ways in which leaders show that they care is to simply be there. So if you've been in a leadership position, were you there for your people? If you weren't physically there, you probably were communicating less about how much you care than you think.
Where you're spending your time.
Yeah, where you're spending your time is important. Stories, by their nature, are public forms of communication. Storytelling is how people pass along lessons from generation to generation, culture to culture. Make celebrations part of organizational life. At a minimum, you ought to have at least one celebration a year that involves everyone and that draws attention to each of the key values of your organization. I'm not going to belabor that, we were already talking about this. But hey, you know, that meant a lot, right? It meant a lot enough that it was on our desk, or our file cabinet. Right? As a first thing that you see when you walk into our new office over across campus. Okay? So what were we really communicating to everybody else by doing this for her?
That you care.
That we care about people in this department. And we want to wish her a fond goodbye. And so what are we saying to that guy and this lady and that guy and that lady?
Yeah.
What are we saying to them?
They're appreciated.
Yeah, we appreciate you too, right? And taking part in that act was kind of communicating that. Okay, chapter 12, leadership is everyone's business. You do not have to look up for leadership. You don't have to look out for leadership. You only have to look inward. Is that true? It's not exactly true. So one of my students a couple years ago said, well, what if we stewardize that? I thought that was a great term. Let's keep that term. Stewardize it. What does that mean? Think through Rodin and answer the question. Is it just about looking inward? So a lot of the leadership literature does this kind of thing. Well, let me just tell you, because I've read a lot of it. Okay? A lot of the leadership literature talks about finding yourself and their authentic leadership and those kind of things. But that's not enough. Right? You need to get that relationship with God straight in order to look inside yourself and find something that's not terribly corrupt. Right? Because let's be honest, we're more interested in our own selves than we are in that tsunami that happened somewhere else on the other side of the world.
Yep.
Okay? So if you want to get that straight, you have to get that straight with God first. Look to leaders everywhere. A survey, a leader that impacted people the most. If you're honest with yourself, and if I say, okay, who's the leader that impacted you the most, and you think about it, it's not the president. It's really not. It's not even the president of your organization. It's not. It's probably a family member, a teacher, a coach, a religious community leader, or a direct manager. It's one of those people. So if you look to somebody who has had a direct impact on you, which that's who it is. It's local.
Yep.
Tip O'Neill used to say that all politics is local. Yeah, and so is the effective leadership. It's local. If you're a manager to your direct reports, you are the most important leader in your organization. And I think we had that in the beginning, right? Do you remember this guy? Didn't I show you this guy in the beginning? You are the people that your direct reports are talking about at dinner every night. They're going to be talking about you one way or the other. So are they going to be cursing you or praising you? And we got to remember this too. We're all broken. Everybody in this room is broken. If you don't think you are, you've got a whole different issue. Right? In some way, we all have issues. Okay? And if you recognize that about your people, well, it's going to go a long way to doing the right thing by them. Right? Leadership can be learned. It's an observable pattern of practices and behaviors with definable set of skills and abilities. But it's going to take you 10,000 hours of practice to become an expert at anything. That's a lot of time. And we spent a lot of time in here, so we're getting a little ways down the line here. Okay? What are you doing to become a better leader? Well, obviously you're taking this class. Hopefully you're making your way through the program. What else are you doing to become a better leader? Because you actually have to do something, not just sit around and think. Thinking's good. There's nothing wrong with thinking, but you have to practice.
I guess practicing emotional intelligence skills, which is a lot of practice.
Just getting out of the box, you're halfway there.
Yeah.
Right? Engineers have computers, painters, canvas, and brushes, musicians, instruments. The instrument of the leader is a self. How about that?
Yep.
You've got to take care of that instrument that is you and perform appropriately. Leadership is not a affair of the head, it's an affair of the heart. You really have to care about your people. Do you really love your people? If so, how does it show? If not, or only partially, what will you do about those that you love less? Do you really love your people? Let's think about Ike. Did he really love his friend?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But he sent him home.
They did what's right.
Does he really love his people, his army? If he does, that guy needs to be disciplined. Right?
Yes. He loves them. Yeah, he loves them because he disciplined them.
Yep. Remain humble and human. The treachery of hubris is far more insidious than any of the other potential problems a leader might encounter. Humility is the only way to resolve the conflicts and contradictions of leadership. Let me read that again. Humility is the only way to resolve the conflicts and contradictions of leadership. I'm going to read it again. Humility is the only way to resolve the conflicts and contradictions of leadership. Didn't I do this once before?
Yeah.
Why am I doing that?
Because it's important.
This is very important. Why? Tell me what's important about this.
It's not about you.
Yeah, it's not about you. What else? What happens when you when you fall into hubris?
You hold on.
You hold on. You can't see. You think you know when you don't know. You cut yourself off from help that you can have. What else?
You treat people as
You
objects.
treat people terribly. You make errors. People are depending on you, and you're screwing them over in the process, right? How do you get out of that hubris? You got to be humble. That humility is important. If you think you know everything, you don't. How about this guy? Remember Eliot Spitzer?
There was a phrase that I used that was hubris is terminal. People who fall prey.
Eliot Spitzer, do you remember him? He was the governor of New York. He made his name as the attorney general in New York, going after big CEOs that kind of thing. And he was the governor, and he stepped down after they found out that he was having an affair with a prostitute. And yeah, after he was all about corruption, chasing down big businessmen for corruption. But listen carefully to what he has to say.
Prey to hubris end up falling themselves. And that, I think, is something to which people in government are susceptible to. Those who feel that they are somehow increasingly important to power.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think infected me. And the fall from grace is incredibly painful. It is something from which you'll learn, and hopefully you can then move on and contribute.
Did you think you would not get caught? I mean, having an affair is one thing, but paying prostitutes to a prostitution ring is against the law.
Right. No,
and as an
right.
enforcer of the law, how could you not know?
You sometimes people take risks that are absolutely irrational, and there is no reason, no justification, there's no good explanation for it.
Okay.
As I say, it is something that speaks to a failure of judgment in a grotesque way that is a moral failure.
No.
What do you say?
I heard what sounded like a fake woman laughing in the background when he started saying a lot of that.
Okay, so what do you think of what he had to say?
I think he's admitting that what he did was extremely wrong.
Kind of.
He's not taking ownership of it.
Yeah, listen again.
How increasingly important to power.
Yeah.
And this is something that I think infected me.
Something that I think infected me. Wait a minute. He couldn't even speak in first person. Now, I did it.
Right.
Right?
It was
He's
something
a
else.
politician.
Yeah, a student pointed that out a couple years ago, but notice how he spoke in that third person? I think this infected me.
It kind of goes through the whole thing just about.
So what defenses against hubris can you construct right now? Because I hope that sometime past this class, you'll be in a position of leadership or power, and when you are, then you have to face those contradictions of leadership, and everything that we're doing is building so that you don't fall into those traps, right? So let's talk about that. So what is hubris? We already talked about. What can you put in place so that you don't become like that?
Well, what comes to mind right off the bat is not just if they're accomplishing or not accomplishing what's required, but what their people say about how they're doing it.
Okay.
And grading them on that too,
Okay.
so that you can get input.
Yeah, you can tell a lot about a leader by how he treats his people. Right? Okay, what else?
I think there's a balance there too.
Okay.
Like, you had the White House, one of the staff members that was beating his spouse or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have that balance of how you're treating not only your people in your direct area, but how you're treating people in the past in your life, your marriages, and with like what you said at the beginning of the classes, now we see everything. So now if something happens, you're gonna see it, so you know, but I think your behavior should be balanced in your home life, your work life, your church life, your whatever kind of life you have. It should be more of a balance. You behave the same.
Yeah, it should be a whole,
Consistent.
not inconsistent, correct.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What he was saying was kind of reminding me of the Uniform Code of Military Justice
Okay.
regarding service members, especially ones that are officers,
Mm-hmm.
with things like conduct unbecoming of an officer and a gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
That's what he said reminded me of.
Okay. So the question is, how do you build in a structure that keeps you from falling into this? What do you need to do to make sure that you don't become that?
I think habit of prayer.
Okay.
Like a strong habit of prayer where you're talking to God who's almighty and infinite. How can you have hubris when you're talking to the King of the universe?
Yep. I've also found that it's hard to be antagonistic towards somebody that you pray for. That's a pretty tricky thing to do.
Yeah.
If you make it a point, if you're not getting along with somebody or you don't like a particular person at work, pray for them. Because that's really hard to then be a jerk to them.
Yep.
That's true.
What else?
And what's coming right to mind is they're people, not objects.
That's right, they're people.
If they
Recognizing
treat
that
us
all
as
people are people, getting into that habit.
treat them as people, and you're not gonna treat them narcissistically, tyrannically, or, you know,
Mhm.
if you're treating them like people.
Okay?
I think also asking people, followers, coworkers, how can I do better?
Okay?
Like of genuinely asking people that.
I'm not a big fan of Mayor Koch, but Mayor Koch in New York in the late 1980s did a great job with this. He would always ask people, how am I doing? Right? He's constantly soliciting that feedback. That's helpful. Okay? What else?
I think you can't fall into other behaviors that come within, like, as you're going through leadership and you have new people come in and you have new styles of leadership. Don't, be aware. I think awareness is a big thing, where people see these people acting this way, and they'll be, okay, if they're acting this way, I guess I can act this way. There's a little bit more of a line I can cross. But I think you should set.
Yeah, you gotta recognize that you're setting that example. You're in a fishbowl. Whenever you're a leader, you are in a fishbowl. People are watching you even when you're off duty. That's just a reality. What else?
That way you have to care about and treat people with respect. I mean, if you continue to do that, it's hard to.
Yep. So in the same way that I don't want you to be holding it so tightly that even if you win, you lose, I don't want you to climb the ladder only to fall off and break your back. Right? Because that's no good. Okay. Something that you need to start thinking about now, putting into place now, working into you right now. How to tell if your dog's involved in a sex scandal. I'm just saying, that's free, it had nothing to do with the book, but just, yeah. Okay, so a little warning, leaders are extra susceptible to the traps of power.
Yeah, opportunity.
Yeah, they have opportunity, they have means, they can violate behavioral norms that you can't violate and get away with it. It's kind of expected or okay, approved, right?
They can game the system more easily.
Jerry Jones, owner and president of Dallas Cowboys, involved in the sextortion scandal, right? This lady, Monica Crowley, would have been a senior Trump advisor, except she plagiarized thousands of words in her PhD dissertation. When that was found out, the White House wasn't interested in her. Yep, that's word by word comparisons from, not so good. It's one thing if it's in quotes, but when it's not, that's kind of bad. Yep, so she could have been a senior aide. Oops. Powerful often feel entitled, like Schumer calling a flight attendant not kind things for telling them to turn off his cell phone. You're supposed to turn off your cell phone when you get on a plane. You all know that, right?
Well, he's a boss.
Oh yeah, but he's important, right? So what's interesting here is it tells me a lot about you when I see how you treat weak or people that can't do anything for you.
Yep.
How do you treat the waitress?
Yep.
Right? That tells me a lot about your character. Powerful people do bad things. Remember Rod Blagojevich trying to sell Obama the Senate seat to the highest bidder? Like you thought nobody was going to pay attention to you trying to gain something from selling off his Senate seat? Bob McDonald, Republican, this goes both ways. Both sides of the aisles have this. Now I know Bob. I actually worked at the polls for him back in Virginia Beach. Not for his governor, but when he was a state senator. Good guy. But little compromises led to 11 counts of corruption. Now, some of these things were a cut above which he was prosecuted at a standard above which other people have been prosecuted. But he accepted things like a very expensive watch and some free trips and other things along the lines that he should have known better. I know he knows better than having taken. But it's very easy to snuggle up to that line and maybe step over it, isn't it? So the job isn't where's that line and how can I get close? The job is run away from the line. Get away from it. No, I'm not taking any trips with anybody that could possibly, look like this, even if he's a friend. or I'll pay my fair freight if I'm gonna go, right? No, stay away from that. I don't accept gifts. Don't do that, right? I mean, you gotta stay away from that line. McDonald was sentenced to 2 years in prison. I don't know if you followed what was going on in Virginia. And what was interesting was the judge that sentenced him, he opposed the appointment of the trial judge's wife to a important position when he was either in the Senate or as the governor. Oops, right? So it was convoluted. Eventually, he was vindicated. The case was dropped against him, but it destroyed him. Right? So even though he didn't serve, even though the conviction was overturned, he was still, I mean, he was not gray when this started. Right? I mean, how about Carlos Danger? Remember him? Wow. Was that not like the weirdest, like, you couldn't have made that up? Like if this was fiction, and this Anthony Weiner's sexting thing, and then doing it again and doing it again, and then involving Hillary's campaign with it because what? Like, she looks happy. Yeah, he's a piece of work. And then Hillary Clinton was involved with it, and just before the election, warrant for Clinton Abatine emails led to feds to seize Anthony Weiner's laptop. Right? So what's going on with all those examples?
Kind of like...
Do people just like lose brain cells when they get to these positions?
Sure looks like.
It sure does. It sure does look like it.
They lose healthy fear.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it. It's like they've lost the right appropriate amount of fear of doing stupid stuff.
Yeah.
Bill Clinton, when he was asked much later about why he did what he did with Monica Lewinsky, well, I thought I could get away with it. Well, how about that?
No.
He thought he could get away with it.
Yeah.
Right?
It's so look the other way because you're so important.
It's that hubris that we're talking about. You know it's wrong. Leave it alone. Lord Acton's dictum, power tends to corrupt. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Now we're all familiar with that line, right? What were we not familiar with? The rest of it. Great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Did I just hear that right? Great men, great leaders, are almost always bad, even when they're only exercising influence. Now that's let alone kings who are going to chop off your head or whatever else. Right? Oh, by the way, the context here is talking about the Pope. How about that? There's no worse heresy than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. Here are the greatest names coupled with the greatest crimes. Huh. So power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Why? Why does power corrupt?
Because you feel like you can't get away with it.
Because you feel like you can't get away with it. Anything else?
And you probably get more opportunities than you may ever would have gotten.
Once people get a taste of power, do they want more or less generally?
They seek more.
They tend to seek more.
Access. Yeah.
It's very hard, like Roden talked about, to go back the other direction, to step down. Even if it's not a big amount of power that you had, to intentionally put it down and step back, it's hard.
Well, what's that, one of your students, never forget what it's like not to be a leader?
Yeah, never forget what it's like not to have that power. Because if you can remember that, and that's what I was talking about when I'm saying, so how do we build these structures against this hubris? Never forget what it feels like to not have power. That's something. Okay, let's take a break here. We'll come back to this and finish up with the rest of what we're talking about, and then we will review what you had.